Walmart is the latest big corporate retailer to pull back on its diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives amid Donald Trump's election. Trump and conservatives have criticized DEI programs as anti-white racism, just to confuse the issue. In Trump's first term, he issued an executive order that banned DEI training throughout the federal government. His incoming deputy chief of staff for policy, Stephen Miller, has filed suit against several companies through his America First Legal. That's the rights kind of response to the ACLU. Imagine like if like the Klan could have their own NAACP or you know what I mean, or something like that. That's kind of what these folk are. But anyway, America First Legal is actually suing these companies. It's so crazy. With the incoming Trump administration's opposition to DEI, many of the companies are bowing out before they become a target. Companies don't want anything to do with DEI, sometimes because they actually don't believe in it and they only did it before, you know, for tactical reasons, which we'll talk about, but also because they don't want to become a legal target. An analysis of 9,000 public companies shows the rise and fall of DEI programs from the year 2020 to the year 2024. I'm going to zoom in on this just so you can see it a little bit better. So from quarter one of 2020 to quarter four of 2024, you can see the how mentions of DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion happen in quarterly earnings calls. Now, I have, it's over 9,000. There's an N of 9,000 for context. Now, I don't want to draw one-to-one between the mentions of them in earnings calls and what's actually happening, because that can be tricky as well. That can be misleading, can be an illusory correlation, as they say. Could be lots of things. But what I do know is DEI is becoming increasingly unpopular and increasingly something that people run from. Now, I would say a couple of things. First, the companies that are so deeply engaged in DEI talk in 2020 didn't give a damn about DEI talk back then, but they're willing to engage in it. In the post Minnesota moment, the post George Floyd moment, there has been just so much, so much conversation, but so much energy put on DEI initiatives. And the reason was because America was having its quote unquote racial reckoning. America was suddenly remembering that there was racism. They were talking about white supremacy. They were outraged at what happened to George Floyd because it was on video, and companies saw an intersection between, it's what the critical race theorists talk about as interest convergence. There was suddenly a convergence between their own interests, which were financial, companies want to maximize shareholder wealth, and this call for justice on the ground. And I was like, okay, we're going to have a racial reckoning. We now acknowledge that racism exists. Let's do something about it. And companies said, we'll do DEI. And so many companies wrote about DEI. They did press releases about DEI. They did special workshops and training sessions on DEI. And they committed to investing in DEI until it became unpopular. Everything turns a corner. And in this case, it turned a corner away from investment in DEI. Now, I don't think we should worship or fetishize identity politics. I don't think that identity politics is the most important thing. We need to think about more substantive notions of representation. I'm not saying, just deal with the content of their character. I'm not saying we need Negroes hired. We need brown folk hired. We need women hired. We need to have DEI initiatives, but we need to be clear about what we're doing it for. It's not just to have cheap representation. It needs to be something else. But it's also important to understand the cynicism that undergirded the corporation's choices to do DEI initiatives and to invest in them. They were only doing it because they thought it was good for business. And the moment it isn't good for business, they bail. They stop hiring Black and brown folk. They stop investing in them. They stop protecting them on the job because they know that's actually bad for business on the other side, because this right-wing movement is actually anti-DEI. They're not indifferent to it. They're not frustrated by it. They are saying, no, we don't want DEI. So it becomes bad for business, and companies are always going to run from things that are bad for business. Rennie Tay said, this is why DEI never worked as an integrationist ethic. The fact that Black liberation is based on the whims of white people, or what white people allow, is problematic. That's exactly right. And that's why I say identity politics can't be the answer. It needs to be grounded in something deeper so that even if the outcome is the same, i.e., you still get more diverse populations, you get a more diverse workforce, a diverse institution. You do so under the proper terms and for the right reasons. Also, it's important to understand for those of you who are advocating for DEI that we need to reframe and stop talking about DEI like it's some kind of hookup for poor people or hookup for Black people or hookup for brown people, hookup for these marginalized communities. DEI initiatives are designed to diversify institutions, which, yes, of course, benefits people who have been historically excluded from those institutions, but that's not the only point of it. Remember, diversity is its own institutional benefit. Companies are better when they have diversity. People are better when they have diversity around them in terms of their intellectual development, their character development, their moral development. People need this stuff. Institutions need this stuff. Institutions are better when they're more diverse. It's just a fact. But too often we concede this idea that we're just helping out these poor brown people who couldn't get into school otherwise. We're helping out these poor Black people who couldn't get into school otherwise. And that can't be how we think about things. We need a more fundamental and radical shift that won't happen by liberal inclusion models. It'll happen by shifting political economy. Until we do that, none of this other stuff matters. So much work to do, y'all.